Alex Alonso here with Street TV, and I'm bringing you guys another episode of Tier Talk. And I got TC out of Los Angeles, out of the Avalon Gardens, and we also got another guest, Daniel, out of the City of Paramount, right here in, I'm gonna say, is Paramount considered Southeast LA or just South LA? Paramount. Where's that at, Daniel?
South LA.
South LA. Okay.
South LA.
And we're gonna start off. Look, I was just talking to Daniel before we started recording, and he told me he's been down for 19 years, but he characterized his 19 years as some chump change, and I was like, bro, 19 years ain't no chump change. But if you're thinking from the perspective of someone who's been in prison with a whole lot of other inmates, 19 years can be considered chump change. So Daniel, let's start off breaking that down. Why did you say you were just doing a little bit of chump change?
Well, first and foremost, I want to give my gratitude to Tier Talk and Street TV and you, Alex and TC, for allowing me to be on this platform and be able to put my voice out there based on my voice being hidden from society for so long. So thank you for that. And to answer your question, Alex, is that you hit it on the dime. Earlier, where you said that, the reason I say that is based on what you said, right, is that when you look at it in the context of, other people doing time and the ones that have paid the path before you and that still are here, some cats have done more time than, have been alive, have done more time than I've been incarcerated, and to me that's like respect. Some people have done 20-something odd years in solitary confinement and, now made it out and, they did 20 years in the SHU program. I've done 19 years in and out the hole, here, SHU, here, there, but I didn't do a stretch in solitary confinement for 20 odd years. So my respect to those that have, so that's why I kind of characterize it as chump change, because there's still a lot more to learn from those individuals that have seen the transformation, the evolution of incarceration in California.
For sure. And TC, you got 20 years in. You just surpassed 20 years in. Daniel's got 19. I always like to total it up. We got 39 years of incarceration here on the phone, and that's not counting juvenile time either, right?
For sure.
TC, can you talk about your first time in incarceration and how many total, if you was to add up any minor juvenile time to what your adult time, how long you've been down?
Oh man, shit. We're gonna go back to like 95. You know what I mean? So if we talking juvenile time and camps and all that old stuff, CYAs and everything, we going back to 95, so you just add that on to what I got.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
You add that on to what I got in now, man, and we pretty much, marching in on like 30 years, you know what I mean? Somewhere around 30 years, man. And I wouldn't specifically, call it, chump change in my view for myself personally. You know what I mean? I met Daniel getting out the SHU. You know what I mean? From doing the extensive SHU term. And I met Daniel in Pelican Bay. We was in Pelican Bay together. And when we met, I have been released from an extensive SHU program, an indeterminate SHU term. You know what I mean? Where I had sat back there for a number of years. You know what I'm saying? And with no end in sight. And I pretty much feel like the only thing that saved me was, in the hostilities when they ended validation. And getting out the SHU. Then that's when I met Daniel, and and we forged a friendship and a bond, and we did some serious building together up there, but yeah, for myself, I wouldn't call it chump change for myself, man. You know.
Okay. Now, Daniel, I want to go back to you and let the people know where you grew up. Let's go back to your early years, living up in Paramount, growing up in Paramount. I know Paramount is very close to Compton. Most people know Compton, but they don't know Paramount. Give us a little background.
So, okay, cool. I like the fact that you even touched on that because ever since I was a kid, able to understand, the era of listening to, gangster rap and NWA and all that, and hearing, Compton and rap music, and all that, and you're right, Paramount is only the only thing that separates Compton and Paramount is a riverbed, so it's a bridge, and so Paramount has been overlooked, in the sense for quite a while of time, and I was born in Paramount and raised in Paramount for a good issue of my childhood, and so being born in
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And being raised in Paramount kind of gave me, some pride towards the city that I was born and raised in, as a youth. And it may not look as underdevelopment as the city at that time as Compton and North Long Beach or whatnot, or Bellflower, right? But if you go through the back streets of Paramount, the same problem, social issues that was going on at the time in those cities around Paramount were going on in Paramount, but in the back streets, you feel me? So if you take the main streets, you feel like it's a nice little city, but, I like to say that, that type of lifestyle is everywhere. It just, if you look for it, you won't find it, you feel me?
Now, I know some of the same streets that we're familiar with on the LA side go right into Paramount, like Rosecrans. I know Rosecrans goes into Paramount, and Alondra goes into Paramount. Are these streets that are familiar to you growing up?
Oh, most definitely, because, Rosecrans stays Rosecrans, going from Paramount to Compton, and Somerset turns into Compton Boulevard after you cross the bridge, and Alondra Boulevard goes all the way down to Compton and past Compton. So same thing with Artesia, going down, past 91 freeway, those main streets are kind of I'm a little familiar with being raised in that city of South LA, you feel me? For sure.
Yeah, and TC, Avalon Gardens is probably like a 10-minute, not even 10 minutes away from Paramount if you was to drive with a car, because you're off at 88th, and you just take Alameda straight down, and then go east, and you right into Paramount.
Exactly.
But it seems like a lot of people think of these cities and these towns are like whole other worlds, but they really not that far away from each other. They're minutes away.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
One more question, Daniel. How much time did you spend on the Compton side, on the other side of the bridge when you was growing up? Was there interactions between the two towns?
It's crazy that you're touching on these things and asking questions because they were so relevant at the time of my upbringing that there was some type of animosity, unspoken animosity for a long time between the two cities, in the sense that kind of like in a set tripping way, you feel me? Like kind of in the same sense of how people back up their fanatics of a certain team and they're loyal to that team, and every time you clash with the rivalry of that team, it was almost like the Steelers and Baltimore Ravens, kind of like there's always animosity there, and it was only a bridge there. You had cats that lived in Compton, but they're going to Paramount schools and whatnot because they're so close. There was always the school to prison pipeline is real, you feel me? And there's always racial tension and even rights, in schools that I would go to. And so, having my experience living in that area, I did travel through Compton much of time because I had to, in a sense, I used to be employed right next to the cemetery on Greenleaf and Central. I used to work around there, so I used to take Greenleaf all the way up from Central all the way to Atlantic, to miss all the red lights. You feel me? If you know that area, you know what I'm talking about. And so, getting pulled over by Compton cops, that's another thing, too, with the different dynamic that the cops in Compton coming out with the pistols.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Rather than getting pulled over in Long Beach or, lingo to Paramount, you're not getting pulled over with gun strapped at the time, for a simple traffic stop. You feel me? So there was definitely a different dynamic between the two cities. Even though they're two cities that are too close, they're completely different vibes. You feel me?
Yeah, real quick, you mentioned the cemetery on Greenleaf and Central. Now, technically, I don't know if most people realize this. There's actually two cemeteries on that corner. One is on the east side of Central,
Sure.
and the other one is on the west side of Central. The one on the west side of Central is actually in Carson. The one on the east side of Central is in Compton.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Which one did you work at?
Correct. So I didn't work in the cemetery. I worked right next to the cemetery, which warehouses right next to the cemetery. On I think the west side of Central, right? There's warehouses, and so I worked at a warehouse right next to the cemetery. So, I spent a lot of time in the cemetery during my lunch breaks. That's where I used to find my peace and tranquility. You feel me?
Okay, so just for the people who are listening, the one on the east side in Compton is called Woodlawn. The one on the west side in Carson is called Lincoln Memorial. And TC, you won't believe who's buried in Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. He's the most famous Crip in Los Angeles history, is buried in Lincoln Memorial.
It's got to be between Cookie or Raymond.
It's Raymond. Raymond is buried there, and I'm friends with Raymond's daughter, Rayshana, and there was a big deal about them not taking care of that cemetery. They would let the grass grow long, and it was just crazy. Okay, but I want to talk about the SHU, since both you guys mentioned it. TC, you mentioned Pelican Bay, and we always hear about Pelican Bay being pretty much the most secure SHU prison in California. What was it like? First of all, what did you do? Not getting into too many specifics, what do you got to do, or what does the prison say you did to where you get sent to the SHU, and what's the SHU living like, TC?
Well, it can be a number of things, man, that can land an individual in the SHU. You know what I mean? It can be, knife beefs. You know what I mean? Possession of knives. It can be used in knives. It can be, a bunch of racked up, assaults and batteries, on inmates, on police, things like that. Or it can just be, a certain type of a structured conduct that'll land a person in the SHU. You know what I mean? And those are some of the things that can land a person back there in the SHU.
So what is it like living there, though?
It's restricted as hell. It's basically it's like being in a jail inside of a jail. You know what I mean? I know. The first time I went to the SHU, you know what I'm saying? I basically had to send all my property home, like all the shit that I wasn't allowed to have, so I had to send that home. And it's like you basically starting over. You basically starting from scratch, and you basically adapting to a new way of living. You know what I mean? A whole entire new way of living. And then, once you get out the SHU, then, you got to go through the process of reordering all this stuff that you had sent home, because you can't get that shit sent back up in here to you. So you got to order all this stuff fresh, brand new again.
So if you have a
You know what I
cell,
mean? So
if you have a cell full of possessions, what happens with all your possessions?
that stuff either gets sent home to your loved ones, or if you don't have, you know, the financial means to send it home, it becomes donated property.
Okay. So Daniel,
No.
Daniel, talk about what the SHU was like for you when you was in Pelican Bay.
I like these questions you asked me because, you know, I was just speaking to somebody not too long ago about, you know, the unique thing about incarceration is that everybody's experience is different. And you could be in the same cell as that individual, and their experience is going to be different from yours, because what you have, in a sense, kind of tolerated, you tolerate certain things. Maybe that person has not been able to tolerate certain things, so his experience is going to be different from yours. You feel me? And so, my experience from the SHU, I knew that I was going to go to the SHU. So, knowing that, you know, much of my property was either given away, pretty much given away before I even hit the SHU, because you know you're going to go there. So, to pack light, and once you're there, you know, cause you go through a process of going to what's called a ASU, Administrative Security Unit. So you go to the hole to you know, upon waiting for your hearing to be found guilty or not guilty, and then they're going to shoot you to the SHU. Depending if your SHU term exceeds a certain amount of months or years, you're going to get shot to the SHU to do the rest of your permanent time for your disciplinary actions that got you there, you know? So, when I went to the SHU, I went to Tehachapi SHU, and Tehachapi SHU, you know, every SHU is kind of, you know, different in a sense as well, you feel me? And Tehachapi SHU is designed even different, it's built different, the structure. And so I landed in a pod, you know, and the pod has about, I want to say, 40 cells around, more or less, you know, 2 tiers. And on one side of the tier, there's about 20 cells, and the other side of the pod had 20 cells as well. So when I got housed in the SHU, on Tehachapi SHU, and they put me on one side of the pod, I instantly realized, the moment they locked that door behind me, I got uncuffed. Because everywhere you go in the SHU, you're cuffed, you know, and so you shackled. And so once they took the handcuffs off, I immediately knew that everybody on this tier are people that really I have no conversation for, because, you know, they kind of fall under a different type of faction, and, you know, don't carry themselves as even humane in a way, as you could say, you feel me? And so all the people that low-key were general population were on the other side of the pod. So I'm basically on an island by myself, and so, you know, the only time I have to interact with, you know, people is when I go to yard, you feel me? So, and at that time, like TC could, you know, attest to, is that during the time that TC was going to the SHU, is that, you know, since your property's gone and you gotta, you know, you know, you can only order a package once a year at the time in the SHU. And so when you first get to the SHU, you gotta do that whole year before you're eligible to get a quarterly package. You know, get your sweats, get your shirts, you know, whatever is hygiene, whatever you need, you feel me? So you're going to those concrete yards, those cage yards, and boxes, and state boxes, and state shirts and socks. That's it. And Tehachapi has all 4 seasons of the weather, so you could be out there in the rain, and next thing you know, it's snowing, and then it's raining by the time you leave the yard, you know? So my experience there was good. It was a good experience, because back there in the SHU, as TC could attest to, is that the mindset, just like TC, TC comes from a different cloth, right? He comes from a different breed, you know, and his mindset is why I gravitated to TC, because he had that SHU mentality that it's a different community when you go to the SHU than when you're on the main line. You feel me? It's just a different community where, you know, that's where you find kind of like your education, you writing your understanding and self-awareness by books that individuals are sending you and telling you, hey, read this book. You know, and these books, they're not just giving you to read them. They're going to ask you questions about these books, so you better read it, because if not, it's like a sign of disrespect. You feel me? And so, to me, it was cool. The show was kind of cool because it showed discipline in a sense. With working out, you know, depending on others, no matter, you know, your race, in a sense, to look out for one another. TC didn't have, you know, soap, hygiene, whatever, paper, stamps, whatnot. My line is going straight to him and helping him out with a little care package, because that's what we do back here. We for the people out there, we help anybody that's coming back there to get what they need. You feel me?
Okay, I need you guys to really talk about this racial tension that we know exists in prison. I'm assuming you're a Latino, Daniel, even though I've never seen you, but you're from Paramount.
Yes, sir.
And TC is black. We hear that it's really hard for blacks and especially Southern Latinos, Southern Mexicans, to be engaged in friendly relationships. I don't know who wants to start off with this question, but I want to know, how is it that you two guys are friendly?
Take it up.
Well, go ahead, Daniel. Well, typically, man, there's a line drawn there amongst, you know, two different ethnic groups. You know what I mean? But, you know,
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
I mean, well, first and foremost, look, you know, coming from, you know, our respective areas and getting locked up, you know what I mean, whatever county jail, first it's a line. It's a line that's drawn, an ethnic line that's drawn. You know what I mean? And then, you know, then come into prison, you know what I'm saying, and witnessing, you know what I'm saying, whatever's going on, you know, that line being drawn, witnessing, you know, racial tension, witnessing, and hell, just even being a part of, you know what I mean, some things like, you know, racial riots and shit like that. And it's like a form of anti-socialism, bro. You know what I mean? You know, we who we is, they who they is, man. You know, they don't f with us, we don't f with them. You know what I'm saying? And we first be anti-social just by the areas that we come from. You know what I mean? We got this. We get this whole indoctrination growing up in our areas to be anti-social, man. We don't f with them. You know what I mean? Whether they Hispanics, whether they, you know, other Crips, whether they Bloods or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And then it gets deeper. We got these anti-social behaviors even within our sections and shit. Whereas, you know, me and the homies right here, you know what I'm saying, we tight, but there's other homies from the set we don't really f with like that. So it's just a whole indoctrination of anti-socialism, you know what I'm saying, from the street to the county to reception to prison. You know what I'm saying, to the yard, you know what I'm saying, to the hole. And, you know, and once you start falling into these settings like, you know, like ASEG, like ASU, like the SHU, you know what I'm saying, you get to seeing, you know what I'm saying, that we share more shit in common than we don't share shit in common. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of commonalities.
Hello.
You know what I'm saying? It's a whole bunch of commonalities, you know what I'm saying? And then you start to erase that line a little bit, you know what I'm saying? And then you start to see like
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
I'm in the same I'm in the same struggle with this individual. You know what I'm saying? And I stand on a certain set of principles and standards, and here it is. This individual, he stand on those same certain set of principles and standards. You know what I'm saying? I'm disciplined in this, I'm structured in this, and here it is, this individual is disciplined and structured in the same thing. And so now it's like, okay, you know what I'm saying? Okay, I can now, go across the aisle to this individual and have a conversation, have a dialogue with this person. You know what I'm saying? And because now I'm a little bit more coaching, I'm a little bit more conscious. You know what I'm saying? And not antisocial on my way, just by my personal observation and analysis of this person. You know what I'm saying? And this whole other ethnic group. You know what I mean? And that's how a lot of friendships and bonds, you know what I'm saying, it's hatched in these places, in the ASUs and in the SHUs. You know what I'm saying? We just simply, you know what I'm saying, come to find out that we share way more, we have way more shit in common than we don't. You know what I mean? We just simply see that we all in the same struggle. We just simply see that we all, you know, dealing with the same feet. You know what I'm saying? We all dealing with the same shit, the same situation in prison. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, real recognize real, and, you know, and officers gravitate to it. You know what I'm saying? And with the gravitational pull, you know what I'm saying, a bond and a friendship, you know what I'm saying, was hatched. You see what I'm saying? And, you know, we got to have it, having, deep dialogues about certain things, about, you know, how he viewed this or what he felt about that. You know what I'm saying? And from to find out, man, you know, a lot of our views and thoughts was the same.
I'd like Daniel to touch on that too, because I'm sure that there's some Latinos, there's some Mexicans, there's some people under that Southern umbrella that maybe they don't embrace it, maybe they do embrace it. You know, how are you able to navigate having relationships with whoever you want to?
Man, that's deep, man. It's easy now. I'm kind of not lost for words, but kind of like, you know, processing what you're saying, because I just recently, you know, went through a situation that was somewhat, you know, three-way, you know, a message was relayed to me in regards to, you know, what you're talking about, right? Like, what are you doing either, you know, over here or speaking to, you know, this individual when you know better, in a sense, you know, for lack of better words. And that was kind of hard for me to kind of like to wrestle with during, you know, in the midst of my transformation, because back then when TC's talking about, you know, going back, you know, in hindsight when we were in that environment of shoes or hoes and lost in that dysfunction, the reason those bonds get built in those shoes, I believe, is because everything that TC said, along with when you break bread with somebody, it's just different. It doesn't matter what religion you are, where background you come from, what your skin color, it doesn't matter, your height, your age. When you break bread, and you could break bread with another individual, you know, and not knowing where you're going to get your, the next soup, the next soap, shampoo, if you're ordering, and knowing that a Southerner is looking out for you, or an African-American dude is looking out for you, a Northern looking out for you, you get a different perspective because of what TC talking about being domesticated from a young age. You know, starts with, you know, boys don't cry, and, you know, only girls do, and it morphs into, you know, being domesticated from the values and perspectives of who's raising you, you know. So for me, I was the learned behavior that I adopted was, you know, the views of my older brother and my culture from my people, where, you know, there was racial comments always being thrown around. And so when you start hearing, you know, these racial comments and kind of division between this, you know, our people and another faction or ethnicity, you kind of start adopting that, and you start, you know, carrying that belief and those principles as well, and that's why it spills over to those schools, middle school, junior highs, and high school, where now segregation is in high schools and junior highs because of what's going on in the household too, right? So we'll break that barrier and able to build that bond between two people that in prison that is known that racial tension, exists and people's views.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored. And recorded.
And when you go against certain people's views that are alongside of you, you're gonna ruffle someone's feathers because you're standing in front of them now, not alongside of them. Because now you got your own mind and your own, you got your voice now and your belief system because you took the time to go in and question what you inherited from childhood from your adverse childhood experiences to your adverse prison experiences, and now you're able to see why do I have this perspective towards or these views or beliefs towards this thing or these people, and when you start embracing your discovery process, self-discovery process, you start learning that all these things that you've been taught or is or you believe is being you were domesticated. It was put on you. I used to say I was a Catholic for so long because my mama baptized me, but we never went to church. But I had to question myself, why am I saying I'm Catholic for? Is it that my belief or a belief that I'm inheriting? So when I started questioning my belief about my belief of my relationship with other ethnicities, is when I had to, come to grips that, like he said, there's a lot more commonalities than differences. And going through the experiences of the hoes, the SHUs, and going through the struggles in prison, and realizing that the only reason I know how to speak so too and defend myself on the grievance process is because of people like TC. Or someone that was a northerner that I was, stayed up right next to that, exposed, some legal game, and I was able to absorb it. But I never soaked up no legal game from my own people. So that was another barrier of why when I met TC in the Bay on the main line as neighbors, he seemed that the CEOs were messing with me, searching my cell left and right. And he had already, I had already had, picked up some game off of people in the hole on how to defend yourself with grievances. But when I ran into TC, he put me on a whole different, game of, of how to prevent these CEOs from stop harassing me and retaliating for, embracing my right to appeal. You feel me? And he told me straight up, look, youngster, if we pursue this lawsuit, in this grievance process with this lawsuit, just know. I don't know if you remember this, TC, but you told me there's two things that's going to happen. Either they're going to continue to coach you, or they're going to come with you with some plastic bags to pack up your shit because they're going to go ahead and send you out to a different prison because they know that I'm helping you. And so, that bond between me and TC, it blossomed into what it is today because of his selflessness of wanting to help his neighbor in the situation because he understood that he already understood that concept of what he touched on, that, hey, we all doing our own number, we all in this mud together. How could I go ahead and be of service to this dude that I could go ahead and relate to and dig the way he moves because he moves like I move? How could I help him? And so that situation and spending time talking and getting to know each other on a personal level breaks those barriers, those racial barriers, and able to go ahead and see that what TC said, there's more commonalities than differences when you get to the nitty-gritty.
Now, Daniel, were you able to gravitate towards someone like TC, an African American brother, because your upbringing in Paramount and then, you know, messing around in Compton, you're exposed to more black folks as a Latino, more so than the guy from East Los or from SGV or from the San Fernando Valley, where there's not a lot of black people that live out there. Does that experience make you see things differently than the average Latino that might be in prison with you?
Oh, most definitely, because
You have 60 seconds remaining.
even though there were those racial barriers in those schools and whatnot, you still kind of interact in class with, you know, other ethnicities, and so for sure it gave me a different outlook and aspect towards a culture that I wasn't from, because I wasn't from and no part of, but I went to school with them. So at the end of the day, I'm able to go ahead and kind of, even the lingo, because like you said, somebody from San Fernando won't talk like me, right? Because the lingo, it rubs off. You feel me? So I may be a Latino, but when you hear me, just my voice, some people might think like, hey, she African American, because at the end of the day, when you come into prison and now you start, you know, embracing individuals from your faction, from Compton, you know, you start embracing that lingo as well. You feel me? So dealing with the racial, you know, tensions and you know, the environment that we grew up in South LA, you know, and being domesticated and thinking a certain way. Once I hit county jail and fighting my, you know, the dope murders that I was fighting, it was segregated when I got there, because it had just been, again, a racial, you know, riot in the LA County jails, to where they, the law enforcement segregated, you know, everyone that was African American and, you know, Hispanics. And so, for the first, I want to say 2 years, I was only around Hispanics the whole time during the time that I was fighting my case. So when it got integrated, there you go. The same thing you've seen and you've been around and accustomed to when you know you're a child, it came back, right? So integrating, but for me, it's different from somebody from East LA, because like you said, that's very important, because they don't really understand or want to understand, or their views or whatever it is, because it's dominated by Latinos in East LA or Boyle Heights or San Diego Valley or whatnot, right? And so a lot of times you would get looked upon if you go outside the penitentiary norms. You feel me? And I've been doing that since I've been embracing my transformation about 9 years ago, and you know, embracing the spiritual side as well has allowed me to even embrace and go against the norm, the prison norms, and that has brought me.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
That has brought me to put in situations that I didn't even foresee before I, you know, when I really told myself I'm a vow to you know to embrace change and transformation. I didn't foresee the challenges and the obstacles that I would face when it comes to racial situations, because, you know, if you're going to transform, then you got to renew your mind overall, right? And the only way, you know, you can transform in my belief is that education without application is, you know, I mean, education with application is the only way to give birth to transformation. And so, if that's the case, I gotta renew my mind in every aspect, and even in those racial aspects as well. And so, it allowed me to go ahead and see people just like me, but dealing with the dilemma of that being frowned upon among others, you know, and that's a little tricky situation for me, because, you know, if I didn't have the education, higher education, and I didn't pursue higher education and try to educate myself for all these years, I don't think I would be here today talking to you, because one of those situations that I would have put myself into based on my transformation and dealing with, embracing other people of other races, I would not have been able to know how to defuse the situation. So now that I know how to defuse the situation, sometimes you just can't defuse every situation, you know what I'm saying? Like, ignorance is what rules in prison, and so you could say all the logic in the world and point out all the holes in someone's story, but at the end of the day, if you don't got the leverage, you're going to go through some things, you feel me? Which I have already gone through things just for, my bond with other, races, you feel me?
Yeah, definitely. Now, TC, I want to know, when you're dealing with Latinos or Mexicans in prison, can you tell the difference between a Mexican that grew up in Paramount, Compton, Inglewood, Lenox versus a Latino that grew up not around no blacks, like the San Fernando Valley, East Los, Boyle Heights, San Gabriel Valley?
Yeah, I kind of can tell the difference. You know what I mean? I can tell that difference for sure. It's just a Hispanic that grew up in areas like mine. They got like a different swag about them. You know what I mean? They use kind of the same lingo that I use. You know what I'm saying? The same jargon that I speak, they speak it, and so that allows me to, to be able to tell the difference between the two.
Is it harder communicating with a Latino that's from, let's say, the San Fernando Valley?
I mean, in the past, it was harder because I felt like, that Latino just didn't get it. He just didn't get, where I was coming from, or, my viewpoints and my thinking points and nothing like that. But, it's two words. It's two words that kind of ease those things. You know what I mean? I mean, what is that, Daniel? Is it solid and active? You know what I mean? If you solid and you active, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? That right there, that speaks volumes. You know what I'm saying? For all ethnicities in prison. You know what I mean? To be solid, to be active. You know what I mean? That's like a damn marriage. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, I want to ask about using the N-word. There's a lot of Latinos that grew up Paramount, Compton, Inglewood. They use the N-word regularly around blacks on the streets, and and no one's really tripping about it. I'm assuming, Daniel, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might have grown up with the N-word in Paramount, and if so, what's it like now being in prison? Because I was told that you can't use the N-word in prison if you're Latino.
And to your point, two people could be right, and those two people could be wrong at the same time, right? And you're right. And however, growing up, in Paramount, like TC just mentioned, the lingo was very familiar. So when you go walking down the block and you're trying to, post up, trying to holler at your homie, from the gate, you hollering and hooting and hollering, and you may, call them even derogatory, names at that, but it's a form of endearment.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
I remember when older homie came out of prison, a fellow individual from, my town told me, hey, bro, if you run into this homie and not say that word, bro. And it was kind of hard for me because I was so accustomed to using that word. And so it wasn't a sign of disrespect. It was more of a, like in our culture, there's a word called pendejo, and that's like a dumbass or dummy. And so in our culture, we use that term as like, hey, pendejo, ven pa acá. Like, hey, dumbass, come over here. But, it's not, in our culture, it's used as in the form of endearment, not to put you down, but it is verbally abusive. You shouldn't call someone a dumbass, right? In Spanish, and it sounds worse in Spanish. So going to your point, it hasn't been that difficult for me because TC, has known me for a little minute and is. It's like when you have a job at an office job, right? And the office job has a warehouse connected to it, and you have a bakery connected to it. The way you would socialize in the bakery with your coworkers may not be the same way you're gonna socialize with people in the main office. Okay? And so the people that are customer service in the office working hours, they're talking professional, but when they go to the break room, that's when you see the hood come out of them. And so, I grew up with people that were Samoan, African American, and Latinos, Chinos, and so it was commonly used. That word was commonly used. But when you come to prison, you got to go back to what I was just saying about knowing. I basically, it wasn't hard for me because I know where it's appropriate and where it was not appropriate. And so, for me, it hasn't been a struggle. I just now understand now that I'm leaving because I just recently became a peer support specialist, and so knowing that the recovery language kind of falls into that. People have certain words that are triggers, and the way someone, you could tell someone and you acting retarded, and that person starts flipping out because you don't know that word was triggered them because from a young kid they've been called retarded from someone in the family, friend, whatever. And so when they hear that word, you didn't call him retarded. You just said you acting retarded, but he gets triggered by that word. So other people get triggered by that N-word that you're talking about. And being mindful of your surroundings and who you're speaking to, I think is key when it comes to your question, because it's still, even though that's the law, in a sense, it still is being used because it's still being used. And there's times that when I'm passionate about something, it comes out. And, I'm unapologetic about it because it's where I come from in a sense. And most people, even in the SHU, ASU, that I have developed a relationship with African Americans, they, from the community you come from, it's acceptable. Like they it's like a African American trying to relate to a Hispanic and was like, hey, what's up, home? Hey, Essa? And they're trying to relate to your culture in a sense. It's something like to relate to you in a sense when you're talking to somebody, if that makes any sense,
Yeah, definitely. Before we wrap this up, I want to talk about a word you just mentioned, Daniel, a couple segments ago, was transformation. And I want to let TC start with this. What does transformation mean as a person that's doing time in prison, and why should the general public even have some sympathy or have some understanding when you guys are incarcerated for committing violent acts? What does transformation mean?
Your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
What does transformation mean for you, TC?
Well, coming into prison, getting incarcerated, you know what I'm saying, at a young age, you know what I'm saying, I was unconscious to a lot of things. I was blind to a lot of things, right? And for a long time, man, I walked in my dysfunction. I walked in that blindness. I walked in that unconsciousness. And after seeing and learning a lot of hard truths, you know what I'm saying, it was at a certain point to where, I looked in the mirror, bro, and I asked myself, you know what I'm saying, some serious, some tough, some hard questions. You know what I mean, about myself and about what I wanted my life to be, what I wanted it to look like. You know what I mean? And that's when I began my transformation process. You know what I mean? So I started to transform, my way of thinking. I started to transform, my views of other people. You know what I'm saying? I started to educate myself. I started to educate myself not just on my own culture, but on other ethnicities' culture. You know what I'm saying? All of that was transformation for me. You know what I mean? And as I continue to transform on my journey and that transformation, it got deeper and deeper and deeper. You know what I mean? And with that, I had to start asking some serious questions about.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
And about what I've done and about, you know, how, you know, back then in the beginning of that, man, I was, you know, I was pointing the finger, I was blaming, I was
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
You know, with my crime, you know, what I've done, you know what I'm saying, with taking the life of somebody. You know what I mean? I used to blame. Not myself, I used to, you know, blame them, like in a sense, well, you know, if they wouldn't have did this, I wouldn't have did that. I wouldn't have pulled the trigger if they wouldn't have did this shit. And, you know, and it's like, you know, how can I transform in that sense if I don't know what steps to take? You know what I'm saying? To engage, you know what I'm saying, in personal transformation to my crime. So then I started, you know, signing up for these self-help groups. Self-help groups like, you know, Victims Awareness, Victims Impact, Criminal Gangs Anonymous, you know what I'm saying, denial management, anger management. You see what I'm saying? So now we're going with these groups. I'm beginning to understand what denial was. At first, I just thought denial was one thing. You know what I'm saying? But denial has a whole bunch of different fucking layers to it. You know what I'm saying? I thought anger was one thing, but anger got all these different elements to it, all these layers. And so we're starting to understand what all these layers and different levels and elements, you see what I'm saying? Now I can begin the process, you know what I'm saying, of transforming, you know what I'm saying, my thoughts and my beliefs to even my own crime. You know what I'm saying? So for me, transformation is different. It's different levels. Like how we started the conversation. You know what I'm saying? You asked Daniel a question, and you know it's like, damn, it's different levels. You know what I'm saying? And so with my transformation on a personal note, is different levels. And you know what I'm saying? And my transformation is still writing itself. You know what I'm saying? It's non-ending. You know what I'm saying? Even after prison. You know what I'm saying? I'm still in the transformation process. I'm still transforming. I'm still working every day to be, you know, the best version possible of myself. You know what I'm saying? And rise to the highest potentials that I can. You know what I'm saying? In my life to succeed in society. So the transformation is never going to end for me. I'm always transforming to be a better me, the best version of me.
Okay. Daniel, you mentioned transformation when answering an earlier question. When did you start your transformation, and what did that actually mean? What did that entail for you?
So, for me, that transformation has been, in a sense, the most gratifying thing that I think I could have ever pursued, in a sense. Transformation for me started back when the last time I went to the hole. And just to give context, I haven't received a serious rules violation for going on 9 years. And so, to me, that's big, because I used to always feel like if you had 3 years or more without a write-up, get away from me. That's how bad my dysfunctional, criminal thinking, how embedded that was, that I didn't trust you if you didn't have a write-up, and it was kind of weird that I was that dysfunctional. You feel me? Embracing dysfunction. And so, last time I went to the hole was in 2015, and in that hole there was a mixture of things that made me do what TC did and look in the mirror and ask myself those serious questions. Was that there's some type of political injustice within these wars that I seen that I from that time, prior to that time, I've seen injustice, but this type of injustice that I was now experiencing it wasn't now I'm not seeing it. Now I'm going through it myself, and it didn't make no sense. You know what I'm saying? When in the sense that when you start realizing that you're not being valued, you know what I'm trying to say? You're only good as your last transaction type of mentality. I started understanding that, you know, I wasn't cool with this. It didn't make sense to me in any type of way. It didn't have no logic. And so reflecting on that and then hearing my mama's words through a third party, that someone I was corresponding with, my mama's words of doubt that, you know, I'm going to just kind of paraphrase of what was told to me that my mama was saying to this person I was corresponding with was that I wasn't basically trying to, you know, reach my full potential and being the best me that I could be within these walls, that I just kind of settled for this type of lifestyle, and I'm not trying to do nothing with my life. I'm not trying to get an education. I'm not trying to do nothing. But what she failed to realize at the time is the, you know, having compassion and empathy for me and try to understand that someone in my shoes would be hard to get a job, a simple job in the kitchen or any job, the lowest paying job, having a life sentence at the time versus someone that has 40 years, 50 years, as long as it doesn't have the life sentence behind it, he could go to the hole and come back and get that job before you get it. Because he in the system, it shows that he's going to potentially hitting society before you. So they prioritize people that have a date. So when I heard my mama's words of doubt, she really didn't understand like my struggle of just trying to get into education because it was hard. And so
this call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Her words of doubt, mixed with the injustice that I was, you know, going through at the time, it made me say, you know what, this doesn't make sense, and I'm gonna prove this person not wrong to make them feel bad, but to prove them wrong in a sense to be proud of me later on, right? And that was in 2016. I was in the hole, and I studied my ass off the whole time, and I was in the 10 months in the hole during that time, studying for my GED, because I thought to myself, man, I've been incarcerated for 10 years. I could have been a doctor by now, and I still haven't even got my GED.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
My programming doesn't even equal the amount of my dysfunction. And so it started I started, you know, through my reflection, I started saying, you know what, I want this. You know, I want something different. But there is no path.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
There's no blueprint. It was like I'm reading transformation, right, just by wanting to have the courage to change and want something different. And so I pursued education. When I got out of the hole, I talked to an instructor in the education department, got me into the GED education department, and within 5 months later, I'm holding up my GED, tapping down, got my GED, and other people been there for, you know, 2-3 years and still haven't got the GED. So it felt good to know that, you know, within 5 months I got my GED, and when that instructor told me, are you willing to register for college? It was so crazy when he told me that, because I didn't see myself being able to be capable of obtaining a higher education, because I thought of myself less than where I come from. I've always wanted to be a professional baseball player, but as a kid playing ball, organized baseball, as a kid, I knew I wanted to be a professional baseball player. But the sad thing about it is that I knew where I was at the time as a child, and I knew where I wanted to be as a professional baseball player, but I didn't know how to connect the dots to get there, or even try to pursue it to get there. And coming to prison at an early age, and within 10, 11 years of my incarceration, I find out that all I needed to do as a child to pursue to become a professional baseball player was to go to college, because that's where the scouts are at. It made me feel some type of way, because it's like I want to educate myself to be able to go ahead and give it back to others that were like in my shoes, that didn't know how to go from being in youth baseball to wanting to be a professional baseball player, and me be able to obtain this education to be able to help these individuals how to go ahead and guide them to their dreams, in a sense, you know. And so higher education opened a new world for me that I didn't even know existed. And I like to say that when you ring a bell, you can't unhear a bell that has just been rung. You heard it. You can't act like you didn't hear it. That's the same thing that happens when you get educated. Once you know, you cannot unknow. So it's a blessing and a curse, because now you start knowing the truth about where you're at, why you are in prison, like the contributing factors that led you to prison. You start studying about ACEs and realize that a lot of things that you chose to pursue or entertain was because you were trying to deal with your trauma that you went through as a child, and not realizing that at the time the connection between, you know, your addiction was connected to your trauma. But all that was because of the higher education and the self-studies that I was doing. So to answer your question about transformation, it started in 2016, and as soon as I accepted that instructor's offer about registration for college,
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I was intimidated. And I was
You have
intimidated.
60 seconds remaining.
I pursued it, and I'm hella grateful, because I wouldn't be here today talking to you, having this opportunity, if it wasn't for me to be alongside people like TC, these people that have been mentors, not even knowing they're mentors and role models of me, leading me to the path of transformation to where I'm at today. And so, to me, there's a verse in the Bible that says, the destruction of my people is the lack of knowledge. And so, to me, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give away your gift. So, to me, I want to be able to go ahead and embrace transformation to be able to curb incarceration in the near future, to the minds of the youth in the future.
Okay. I think it's going to cut off. I wanted to give TC the last word. Is he?
I mean, yeah, just, you know, the dig deep, man. Like, just people got to, you know, tear down all those, you know, all the bullshit about them, man. All the bullshit about their past and how they came up, and, you know, what their beliefs are, and, you know, and break down the, you know, the anti-socialism, man. And, you know, once you tear all that bullshit down, you know what I mean? It's like you know, doing a demolition to a building, but, you know, doing a demolition on yourself, and, you know, rebuilding and reconstructing. You know what I'm saying? A new way. You know what I'm saying? Transforming. You know what I mean? Transformation. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that, you know, we can all do as humans, man, as individuals, man. You know what I mean? To, you know, to become better people, you know what I'm saying, and, you know, better brothers, you know, better husbands and sons and whatnot, you know what I mean? It's just tearing down the old, man, and reconstructing and rebuilding on something new, you know what I mean? And that's, you know, that's my final word on it, bro.